Matter. I'm David Henry. I'm chair of the Department of Communication Studies at UNLV, and it is a delight to welcome you to the second of 5 public lectures associated with UNLV's hosting debate number 3 in the U.S. presidential debates for 2016. That third and final debate between the two presidential candidates is on campus here on October 19th. We are indebted to the Campus Engagement Committee, which has been planning the UNLV participation in the debates, to the UNLV Libraries, which has funded support so that we can film and make available to people who aren't able to be here for the lectures themselves. They will be able to gain access to the lectures, not quite instantly, but the first lecture was delivered on Thursday and is already available. And we would also like to thank Dean Rob Ulmer and the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs for making this space available for these lectures. Finally, I have an announcement from Dr. Jacob Thompson. This program will unfold in 3 parts. After the introduction, Dr. Mckinney will deliver his lecture, and then Dr. Thompson, our debate coach, will come forward, and also the planner of these lectures and someone who has worked about 14 hours a day, 9 or 10 days a week to hear him tell it on the lecture, on the debate program, the presidential debate program that will culminate in the debate on October 19th. He will come up here with Professor Mckinney, and he will choose from among the questions that audience members have as the lecture unfolds. You should have received cards on the way in, and as questions occur to you, please write the questions on the cards, because we're then going to give them to Professor Thompson, and Professor Thompson will select which questions will go forward. All right, and if you slip him $25, $30, $40, yours goes closer to the top. I have known Mitchell Mckinney over 20 years, though I met him for the first time about 25 minutes ago. As is not infrequently the case in academic culture, faculty come to know one another first through a record of scholarship and service, and later through personal contact. Dr. Mckinney is with us today from the University of Missouri-Columbia, where he is professor of communication, and then I had to scroll out chair of the Department of Communication because a former student of mine led a coup and overthrew him 15 days ago. She was appointed interim chair when he was appointed associate provost at the university. And he is also director of the Political Communication Institute, which he helped create in 2012 and has headed since its inception. Mckinney appears to have known his career goals early on. He graduated summa cum laude from Western Kentucky University, where he co-authored his first convention paper in his senior year, research honored as a top 3 paper by the Southern States Communication Association. He has since authored or co-authored over 100 other conference and convention papers, no fewer than 8 of which have been similarly honored for excellence in scholarship by regional, national, and international scholarly societies. From Western Kentucky, Dr. Mckinney moved to Chapel Hill for his master's degree at the University of North Carolina, and then to the University of Kansas to complete his PhD. At Kansas, his advisor was Dr. Diane Carlin, a groundbreaking teacher and scholar in political communication generally, and presidential debates in particular. Mckinney co-edited 2 books with Professor Carlin, but he has published 5 others as well. In addition, He is co-author or author of over 40 refereed journal articles and book chapters, over a dozen invited publications, well over 100 refereed conference papers, and he has received in excess of $350,000 in grant support to fund research. Though an impressive scholar, Mckinney devotes considerable attention to endeavors well beyond his research. He has directed 15 completed dissertations at Missouri and at the University of Oklahoma, where he was for 4 years before going to Missouri. Authors of those works have received 3 campus and national dissertation awards. At Missouri, he has received the Outstanding Graduate Mentor multiple times, as well as additional honors that recognize excellence in teaching. Beyond the classroom, he was invited by the U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates, those are the folks conducting this year's debates, to assist with the production of debates in 1992, 1996, and 2000, which he also did for the South Korean presidential elections in 2002, as well as a series of U.S. gubernatorial and Senate debates. He doesn't shirk from work. It is an honor, then, to introduce Professor Mitchell Mckinney, who has taken as his topic this afternoon, exploring the U.S. presidential debates, the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media use and debate viewing. Dr. Mckinney.
Thank you, David, and Jake for the invitation. As you'll see, and as I've told Jake to throw things at me when time runs out, I love talking about presidential debates. I've spent my career doing research in presidential debates, and any time that I can come and talk to a group about the scholarship and the practice of presidential debates, and particularly I'm pleased to be here at UNLV. I know the excitement that's building. What you will experience in the next few weeks, October 19th, I believe is the date. I've often said, and I've worked with the commission, and I'm very pleased that they continue to locate the debates on college campuses, because it's frequently the case where I've been to presidential debates, I've worked with students on those campuses. It really is a laboratory for democracy, where you will be the center of the political universe for that period. The journalists that will be here, the campaigns will be here, and I think aptly citizens and representing those citizens will be the students of this campus. So I'm very excited for you. I thought this afternoon, and I want to get as quickly as possible to that last sub area of my discussion with you, and I hope that it will be a discussion. I've got several points that I want to throw to you and see what you think about what's going on with our presidential debates. But before I get to the evolving media landscape and the intersection of social media and presidential debates, I thought I would step back a bit and start with a little bit of how we got to where we are today. And so we'll look at a little bit of the history. Why should our leaders, our presidential leaders, debate one another? And do they matter? And if so, how? I'll quickly try to go through some of that. And then we'll get to this notion of what I call social watching, multimedia multitasking, second screening, whatever the phrase that perhaps you want to put to it. But first, if I say in the beginning, and I like this discussion that I have with my own students in Missouri, did we start presidential debates with Senator Douglas and Abe Lincoln actually I'll give the year in just a bit. Is that where presidential debates started? Now the clue here is with my own students, who many of them are from the state of Illinois, they see that map of Illinois and they know, no. They didn't just travel around the state of Illinois in presidential debates. They were doing what? What type of debates? Not presidential, U.S. Senate debates. Yes, U.S. Senate debates. Now, I hesitate to even raise this because my learned colleague David Zarefsky, who has written the book on Lincoln Douglas, was here just last week. I don't know if David talked about the Lincoln Douglas debates, but I also share this because I think frequently we ignore precedent, we ignore history, and we often think, wow, you know, we're just in a big mess and all sorts of things going on. When the novice new candidate Abe Lincoln debated the incumbent Senator Douglas in the state of Illinois, we had debate on the debates, much like we had a few weeks ago. Will we have them? Will I show up? Where will we have them? Where should we have them? We had debate on the debates. Now, it was a rather gentlemanly exchange of letters. You can go to the Library of Congress and see these letters of where they were haggling a bit over which city should we go to? How many should we have? How long should they be? We also had partisan media coverage of those debates. There were what were known as partisan newspapers, partisan press that would print differing transcripts, clean them up to favor their candidate in those debates. We also had a lot of media hype and also entertainment. Most of the folks, and I've seen, and maybe this comes from David's book, anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000 folks showing up for those debates, many on the lawn with their picnic who couldn't hear the debates, but they were there having a good time. They were there for entertainment value. We'll talk a little more about entertainment value of debates, this serious thing. So we had a lot, if we say in the beginning, but of course that wasn't the beginning of our presidential debates, those U.S. Senate debates. So in the beginning actually it took us more than 100, so 1858 to 1960, in the beginning. We finally got our presidential candidates on the same stage. That tradition that will continue here on October 19th, next month. So one quick question, what do you think? We're talking about social media today and the evolving media landscape in presidential debates. Why did it take us until 1960 to get our presidential candidates on the same stage? What do you think? Television. So a dominant emerging media of the day, and as a convenient way of reaching the people, certainly. And I talk about this, if we could talk about format, we could talk about some of the other issues of debates. Our presidential debates haven't changed fundamentally than what we had in 1960. Now, some say they should. Actually, what I now point to is one of the major changes is this evolving media landscape and how we engage the presidential debates today. Now, why debate? We often talk about the reach. Still today, in terms of a dominant campaign moment, there is a continuing reach. Now, certainly 61 million people in 2012 is a smaller segment of the U.S. population than 63 million people. And unlike in 1960, when you turned your TV on, you could not avoid debates. You can now. But you still see there's a sustained interest in these moments, these key moments of the campaign. Now, we could go back to, and I told Jake, I said, I've got so many slides, if I start to do the internals, we could go back and talk about the 36, 38 million dip and what happened there and what was going on. And that's interesting. Actually, it was driven by some of the campaigns wanting fewer people to watch the debates. What about this? Here's a neat quiz for you. The most all time, 81 million. 8 days before the election, finally Jimmy Carter agreed to debate Ronald Reagan. Estimates are, come later this month, we probably might break this number, break this record. Now, you may think, oh, well, we're the third presidential debates, and I'm sure interest will wane. Maybe, maybe not. We might mirror what happened in 1992 Clinton, Perot, Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, when viewership actually rose over the span of that debate series. Most folks think we might break this number. I've heard folks say as high as 100 million. I don't know. We'll see. I think we likely might break the 81 million. Now what's going on number 2? What is that about? Bit of history there. Only one time in the history of televised presidential debates has a vice presidential debate eclipsed the top of the ticket, the presidential debates. Usually vice presidential debates come in at about half the viewership as the presidential, but not so in 08. Not so in 08. What happened? Why? Sarah Palin. And let's put another name to it. You saw the opening slides. Why? Tina Fey. Entertainment media. Driving folks to traditional media. Wanting to see a good show, right? They wanted to see a good show with Lincoln Douglas. I also think we might break this number because there's some entertainment value coming along with this set of debates. We saw that in the primaries. Primary debates this cycle broke all records in terms of viewership. There was entertainment value. Now, we could talk about good or bad in terms of its impact on our democracy, but certainly that's always been a factor. Now, I put too much here. We're going to quickly go on why debates. We can compare the candidates under equal conditions. Now that's very rare in a campaign. One person has more ad money, one person produces a better convention, but we have equal conditions on the debate stage for a comparison. Our research has also found that citizens find the debate moments, the debate messages, the most credible of all forms of political communication, campaign communication, certainly more so than advertising messages and other forms of messages. So for the citizens, why debate? Greatest amount of public interest or attention when we ask during an ongoing campaign, are you paying attention? Are you interested in this campaign? It spikes at debate times. We also know, this is some of Tom Patterson's work, you talk more to other citizens about the campaign during the debate time. During the debate series, citizen-to-citizen communication. Michael Fowl told us that the debates have a tendency and ability to reach the marginally attentive. Those are not the political junkies. Those are not the folks that are really tuning in closely to politics. But come debate time, they start to take notice. And then finally, John Lucchese, this is what's going to happen on October 19th. The enactment of We the People, where in our system of electoral politics, the leaders stand before the people, literally on a stage in this town and before the nation, asking for your support. That's what happens in the debate moment. Now, certainly why debates for the media? It's a great show. It's a great show. Right? We have the instant polls leading up. We have the pop polls the night of. We have the tracking data showing us who went up and who went down. That's important. That's important in terms of who may have turned in a good performance. Now, what we do know in our content analysis of campaign communication is of all of the stories in an ongoing campaign, debate stories eclipse all others. So there's a lot of media attention. You're going to see that on this campus. Now, do they matter? Here I turn to some work by a former colleague, Steve Chafee, who studied a lot about debates. Every 4 years I pull this out and I do an assessment. Are they going to matter? Might they have an impact? I actually think we might have all 4 conditions at play in this cycle. All 4 conditions at play in this cycle. Now, I added the unpredictable. That's not a Steve Chafee condition, when at least one of the candidates is relatively unknown. But we still, in terms of the 2 major party candidates, one is still somewhat unknown, and certainly I would say unpredictable. That, I think, would draw attention, draw interest. When the race appears close, boy, just in the past few days, national polls, battleground state polls seems to be tightening. When it's close and when enough voters remain undecided. We're seeing some numbers in this election of the undecideds being larger than we've had in several past election cycles. And then finally, party allegiances are weak. Boy, that's also thrown this time, particularly on the Republican side. But in terms of independence, and we have yet the commission to make a decision on the inclusion of third party in the debate. I think all these conditions may be at play. Now, traditionally, I won't go through these. I've got 2 lines here. Work that I did with Diana Carlin, where we went back and we looked at some polling data before debates, while the debates were happening, and then also on election day when, in exit polls when people were asked, what led you to make your decision? And debates were cited. We cite a number of cycles where we think the debates may have been influential in the outcome of the race. This is a group of political scientists. You can see their numbers are almost, their years are almost with us, except with the exception of 1992. And there we quibble over the impact of Ross Perot. Who did he draw from the most? But what we do know is that he met the 15% threshold to get into the debates in 92, and then once he was in the debates, he ended up pulling nearly 19% in that election. Now, we also know, just look at a couple of numbers here. General election debates typically don't change people's minds for who they're supporting. Nearly 90%, and this is our research over a span of about a decade, nearly 90% say no change. I'm there cheering on my person, my candidate. But there is some change. And that change, and again, going back to Chafee's conditions in a close, tight election, can make a difference. But certainly, and I wanted to point out, in primary elections, we see much greater change in primary debates. The impact of primary debates rather than general election debates. But still, there is some change in general election debates. Now, the issue image question, I put this in here because I want to talk about when we get to our social media. We'll look at the content of what we're posting and what's streaming on our Twitter feeds. This question usually comes up. Well, what are they all about? Is it the issue or image dimensions? And sometimes I look at it this way, I say, what do we learn? Is it issue or image? Notwithstanding what I call the myth of the 1960 Kennedy-Nixon image assessment of Mr. Nixon turning in a bad performance, sweating, and losing the election. There's not a lot of, I think, solid empirical evidence for that, but that has built up over time. Notwithstanding of that, let me share what we have found over a number of election cycles, over decades, is that the dominant form of what I call learning is image learning. The impact of image assessments of the candidates. Who's likable? Who do I feel most understands me? I have a relationship with. Now, in research that I did in 2004, where we looked at and we asked the question, a large national focus group study of, okay, after you watched the debate, what did you learn tonight? What did you know that you didn't know before you watched this debate? You see, and then we categorize claims of learning as either image learning or issue learning. And you see the breakdown there across the board. And also this will say something, I think, about formats. Across the board, folks told us they learned about the candidate's character, the candidate's image, the candidate's likability. And those, I think, are important dimensions of our leaders. And certainly that seems to be privileged in terms of the type of learning in campaign debates. Actually, look at that town hall. That's going to be the second debate this year. We instituted town hall debates in '92. Town hall really is a performance. And you see the disparity in terms of issue or image learning in the town hall debate is much greater. The candidates walking around, interacting with citizens, sometimes interacting with each other, face to face. what I call the chat debate. Actually, I think the Debate Commission has done some innovations in terms of its formats, and I sometimes refer to it as the stand-up, sit-down, walk-around affairs. The formal podium debates, you see, has a pretty good spread. Actually, if you want to diminish that difference between issue and image learning, it seems to have happened in that sit-down affair, that chat debate. But still, image seems to rule the day in terms of televised presidential debates. Now, I'm going to share with you a little bit about these normative democratic outcomes, effects of debate viewing. Normative, good for democracy. I claim, others have claimed too. In terms of two variables here, two attitudes: political cynicism, political information efficacy. And I've just given you the items there so you can see what I mean by political cynicism. Politicians quickly forget their promises. People like me don't have any sway. One can't trust what politicians say. So one's level of cynicism toward politics and politicians. Political information efficacy, this is a measure of how confident you are in your political knowledge. I feel that I possess enough knowledge to participate in politics. I have a pretty good understanding of the important political issues facing our country. Political information efficacy, how confident you are in your political knowledge, and then political cynicism, how cynical you are toward politics. Now, a debate scholar who I admired greatly, Michael Fow, at one point said that there are no more important debate effects that we can understand than these normative democratic outcomes. Again, we know that in general elections, most people don't change their mind about the candidate. But on these measures, viewing debates, this is a study that is across nearly a decade. Viewing debates decreases political cynicism. After citizens watch a presidential debate, our pre-post research shows they always come away less cynical about politics and politicians. Now, I'll point out why I think that's even more important than just the outcome of post-debate watching. Viewing debates increases political information efficacy. Now, I don't think that's a stretch. 90 minutes, I feel like I know more about these candidates and politicians, about these candidates and politics. We also know from our research, those who have less cynicism tend to vote in higher numbers. Those who have greater political information efficacy tend to vote in higher numbers. Now, as an outcome variable, we hope we have citizens participating in the political process. And we think, too, that there are certainly some attitudinal measures related to who might show up and vote and who may not show up and vote. And we think a debate message has some effect on these attitudes. Right? Now, to the topic at hand. Whether or not, I talked about the myth of the Kennedy-Nixon sweating and losing the election, whether or not this visual depiction is myth or not, that this is how the family, the body politic, engaged in and viewing the presidential debates in 1960 with rapt attention around the screen with the whole family, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. But what we certainly do know, and I cite, it was a media marketing firm last year, and I saw these numbers and I thought, wow, this actually even surprised me. Because we know there are some generational differences. Right? Some of you have got your social media here. And maybe you're hashtagging the lecture. I don't know. I let my students, sometimes I get annoyed by, wait a minute, or are you doing things related to class there or not? Now, in terms of social media multitasking, and I'll talk about social watchings, but social media multitasking, we know many of us, I shouldn't include myself in this, we multitask driving down the road, right? We even have laws now against that, right? Maybe after I describe some of these findings from our research on social media multitasking, you may think we should have a law and not allow it during presidential debates. Some of us don't allow it in classes, do we? Put those devices away. Yes, it's distracting. You can't learn. But let's transport that into the presidential debate viewing. Do you learn better? Now, one bottom line I have is it's a fact of life. It's a fact of the media evolving landscape. That's how we engage. Now, Accenture said 78%. I remember when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's even higher than I thought. Of media consumers use more than one device at a time. We are second screening. I sometimes tell my students, I'm not second screening home, I'm third and fourth screening. TV's on, laptop's over here, the iPad's on my lap, I've got my iPhone over here for something, right? That's how we engage media today. A group at the Annenberg Center, this is Kathleen Jameson's group, and I'll cite the study in just a bit, did an analysis of debate viewing social media multitasking. Now that's a mouthful, isn't it? It's what those of us researchers at the Political Communication Institute refer to as social watching. Social watching presidential debates. You're watching the debate, engaged in your social media, Facebook post, Twitter stream. You're commenting on the debate. Now again, largely that's how we engage not just political media, actually, more so sports media, entertainment media, right? We vote for, what do we vote on now? It's not American Idol. See, I usually give away my lack of pop cultural references. What are we voting on now? Bachelor or who? What do you vote on? The Voice. The what? The Voice. Okay, yeah. So and just think how much more engaging, because you're participating in the decision making, aren't you? You're not just passively sitting there. And why not with the presidential debates? Now, I'm building it up. There are some questions to be answered in terms of how we social watch, how we social media multitask. Now, 4 years ago, actually I used the phrase the Twitter election, and I think I did that because 8 years ago I wrote something, I used the phrase the Facebook election. I saw someone the other day use the phrase Snapchat election, right? Maybe we're on to a new platform. I don't know. I'm not. I still think starting later this month, you even had a hashtag for the lecture, didn't you? Or no, for your, I still think we're going to be tweeting and also other dominant forms of social media as we engage politics. Now, if we look back just 4 years ago, we saw some history made. Barack Obama's 2012 State of the Union, at that time, this was the record in terms of tweeting politics. 14,131 tweets per minute. Then we went into the summer, and his acceptance address drew 52,756 tweets per minute. Then we got to that first presidential debate, 158,690 tweets per minute generated by citizens viewing the debates. And then on election night, we set a new record. We'll probably set new records this cycle. Now we'll talk about some of the dominant moments on this. This was Big Bird. I have to get it. We had Big Bird. Mitt Romney was going to cut funding for PBS and kill Big Bird. And then we had, actually in the second debate, we had binders full of women. You remember that phrase? Meme, hashtag. Then we had horses and bayonets in the third debate. Now, that's one question. So does all of this, and I call it the memification of our political dialogue, what does it just result in cute, humorous, snarky moments that catches everyone's attention? It's kind of like the kittens on, YouTube viral media. We all like to watch little kitten images, don't we? So what catches our attention in presidential debates? Is it those gaffes, moments of humor? I think it goes beyond that. I'll share some of our work here in terms of the possibility, the possibility of citizen inclusion in the debate dialogue, of citizen inclusion. Remember, you said you want to have a say in who wins the voice. Do you want to have a say in and provide your commentary on the candidate's performance in debates, or on the candidate's issue stances in debates? Now, I say the possibility. Dean Freeland, and he's at American University, and a colleague, they analyzed political elites. They had access to the Twitter fire hose, and this is a big data study, hundreds of thousands of tweets analyzed, but they classified them as political elites versus ordinary non-elites. That's just you and me tweeting. Now, one question is, do we somehow differ than the so-called political elites in terms of what we comment on? Freeland and colleague found that non-elites focus on the same topics as political elites. Now, I hasten to add, and they point out in their article, this is my commentary, it was not a very robust issue agenda. Both elites and non-elites were commenting on humor, sort of snark, sarcasm, candidate, also we'll see candidate image characteristics in the debate. Our own analysis looked in 2012 at some primary debates. One of the things that we were interested in, and we classified, I think it was the top 100 political pundits, and we followed their Twitter feed during the primary debates. And then we also had access to these so-called non-elites. We were interested in, do the citizens and the so-called elites, political pundits, do they comment, talk about the same candidates? Remember, in a primary debate, you had sometimes 16, 17 folks on a stage. No difference in candidate mentions. So who caught the attention of the ordinary citizens were the same people as those who caught the attention of the political elites. Also, no difference in topic frequency, issue versus image mentions. Largely, both elites and citizens commenting on image characteristics of the candidates while they're debating. Now, another change, and I like to provide some historical perspective here. What I call collapse of the 24-hour news cycle. We used to say the 24-hour news cycle, and then we said the every hour, the CNN 60-minute news cycle, and then it was sort of down. Social media has brought it now down to every second news cycle, and what I mean by every second. And this I think has implications for the campaigns and their handlers, for the candidates, for the traditional or for the news media, and also for us, we the citizens. And here let me illustrate this collapse of what's driving the news cycle. Mitt Romney in the second the town hall presidential debate in 2012. He uttered the words in a reaction to a question, I think, from one of the citizens or Candy Crowley. He uttered the words, it was on appointment of women in government positions. And he uttered the words, binders full of women, right? That he had binders full of women that he could turn to or appoint for these positions. It was less than 90 seconds that the domain name bindersfullofwomen.com had been secured. And it was by a pro-Obama, as I recall, organization. Less than 90 seconds, the domain had been secured and content had been posted there with a hashtag sending that out. You'll see a little later when I talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Does social media devolve us into the sort of the memification of our political discourse? Whereas it took a full day when Gerald Ford freed Eastern Europe in, I think it was his second debate, in 1976, that blunder, that gaffe was caught by the next day's news cycle. It wasn't until Cronkite went on the next day's evening news and commented and reported on this gaffe that we started to see Ford's numbers dip. So it's that as the words are coming out of their mouth, the news cycle is happening. And as I said, and it's not just the elites driving it. It's you. It's you. as well. Now, some of our social watching studies. Hopefully you're going to think I'll get to some of the good. It's not all. Some of the good. Social watching studies. Here in 2012, we did a series of studies where we examined, and these were largely college students' convenience samples. These were several thousand sites all over the country who were watching the debates, presidential debates, tweeting about the debates while they were happening. And then we were studying these folks before and after the debates. You see there, first we asked the question, so who's tweeting? Those who reported talking more about the campaign and having greater interest in the campaign, we found were tweeting more frequently during the debates. So a higher level of campaign interest seems to drive one's willingness, eagerness to engage in social watching. You've got something to say about the candidates in the debates. This was an interesting question because we wondered this notion of relationship between ideology and tweeting. And I'll show you another bit of evidence in just a bit that might support this notion of sort of an echo chamber and polarization in social media use. But what we found, at least in 2012, that there was no relationship. Those who reported we have an ideology extremely conservative to extremely liberal, we found no relationship that those on the so-called extremes tweeted more often than those who said, I'm right in the middle. So no relationship between ideology and tweeting. Those who tweeted more often while watching the debate felt more confident in their political knowledge after the debate. I think that's understandable. You've engaged this message. You've been proactive in commenting about the message, so you feel more confident in your political knowledge. Reported greater satisfaction with the debate viewing experience, and you perceive the debate to be more important. Versus those who were not frequently engaging the debate through social watching. Now here's a big question. There's a lot on this slide, and I will summarize it hopefully easily for you. The verdict is still out, folks. The verdict is still out. That's a typical academic answer. It depends, maybe, we don't know. But really it is still out in terms of this key variable. This is sort of in the lecture hall, put your devices away. It distracts you from learning, right? We've asked that question in terms of post-debate, and also the Annenberg group, and came to a different conclusion. Gottfried et al. In an article that came out just this year in our own PCI studies. In our studies, controlled lab, convenient sample, college students, come in, fill out a survey, watch the debate, tweet. After the debate, we asked you some knowledge questions. These are questions about certain claims that were made in the debate immediately after the debate, and we see what sort of score you get. Now, some say this learning is recall. Well, there's an element of recall. Yes, we also tried to look at the difference between pre-debate general campaign knowledge. So what we're saying there is we don't think what's going on is the people who scored better after the debate were just smarter coming in. We don't think that that's the case, right? But you see there, we found that those who tweeted more often during the debate learned more, scored more, had more correct scores on post-debate knowledge items than those who didn't tweet as often. Now, that claim, we said, perhaps shows some motivation of processing the message. You're engaging it more fully, more deeply, you're commenting on it. But, Gottfried et al., they claim, though, in their research that the effect of debate viewing is dulled when simultaneously engaging in social media multitasking. Their finding came to a very different conclusion, that those who tweeted more while watching debates scored lower on their knowledge measures, did not score as well than those who didn't tweet while watching the debate. Now, there's some methodological issues going on. I put them here. Theirs is it's a national phone survey. Post-viewing was measured, post-debate viewing and knowledge was measured a few days after the debate. Ours was immediately after. They actually, it's a good study, they actually cite our study in theirs by saying perhaps what happened in ours is that our folks were primed to pay close attention because they knew we were observing them. Maybe so. But I've been around college students long enough to know, even when they think you're observing them, But the verdict is still out here, I think, folks. So what about the content of what you're tweeting? And then I'm quickly going to try to wrap this up. This is from our studies. In general, debate viewers tweet more about candidate image. We've already found this in earlier studies, that debates are largely about image. Debate viewers tweet more about candidate image, yet I like that second. I was one of the originators of this construct of PI, the confidence in your political knowledge. What we did find is that those who are more confident in their political knowledge will tweet more about issues than image. In general, debate viewers' Twitter comments are more frequently directed toward the candidate they oppose. This is interesting. You typically, in our studies, you typically tweet more often about the person you oppose, right? And debate viewers who are more highly polarized will tweet in a more negative tone. Their tweets are more attack-oriented, more snarky, attacking the candidate they oppose, those who are more highly polarized, right? Now, let's try to summarize, and then I'll see what questions you have. And folks, this is work in progress. I've shared with you this evening, the verdict is still out. We still don't know, right? I don't know that we yet fully know the effects of television viewing, as we started in the 1960s. But certainly with social media multitasking, we're trying to get a handle on what may be going on. Now, I think if we look at the good, I like the fact that we the people, can be more actively engaged in the debate message, in the political message. Just like we can be more actively engaged with The Voice, we can be more actively engaged in the presidential debate. And also, I think it facilitates a more active engagement. When I say active, that I relate to some of our findings in terms of higher confidence. We're replicating our studies this cycle to see if, in fact, it leads to greater knowledge. Or is it deleterious on the knowledge front? As I said, the verdict is still out there. The bad or the not so good. Here I would go to that instant spin cycle and the culture of social media, humor and snark. This is the what I call the so-called memification of debate dialogue. And hashtag binders full of women, kill Big Bird, then we have Big Bird going viral. If those become sort of the takeaways of our debate messages, I'm not so sure that that's a very positive thing for our electoral process. If that's all that this social media multitasking is going to yield for us. I don't think it's all. Now, the ugly or the potentially harmful to democracy, and here I reference some of Cass Sunstein's echo chamber. Think about it. Social media, your social media network, tends to be people, your friends, perhaps people like-minded, perhaps people who agree with you, who believe what you believe, right? And if you see that reinforced in this, particularly if tweeting leads to more attacking the opposition, greater negativity, that becomes the slice of politics that you're constantly subjected to, may not be so healthy. And I think we've got some questions to answer on that front in terms of what's happening with social media. So that's all I have. So we'll let the debates begin here in a few weeks. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mckinney. So happy that you could be here. I want to shake your hand because that was such a great presentation.
Yay,
thank you very much. Really happy that Dr. Mckinney could be here. I want to thank our sponsors again, our volunteers as well. I want to recognize as well Regent Sam Lieberman, who's here. I want to thank you for your support and for showing up. And for everyone who's helped to make this possible today. All right, so we have several questions from the audience. As soon as I get them, I'll be able to ask them. But we have one that happened, that someone wrote down earlier today that I thought was really a great question here, and we'll start with that. And so I wondered if you could tell me here, do you think that candidates and campaigns view the use of social media as a plus, like they can reach more people, or a hindrance. It's just another thing that they have to stay on top of. It's more time consuming, etc.
Yeah. I've answered that before in a kind of snarky way myself, maybe keeping with the culture of social media. It's a thing. And in terms of it being a plus or something to stay on top of, the campaigns and the candidates now know that it's such a presence and force in campaign communication that they had better incorporate it into their messaging, and particularly sort of a rapid messaging, right? I think we've seen in this cycle, Donald Trump has masterfully generated attention to himself through his tweeting, sometimes for good or for ill, but certainly there's many of us interested in what is he going to say. And what campaigns know is silence is typically not good if you're not engaged in that dialogue somehow. Now, speed can, I won't say kill, but speed can harm, right? I'm going to go off half-cocked, I'm going to say something, and then I have to pull it back because of sort of the instant messaging aspect of social media. As soon as some thought hits your mind, it's out there, and then maybe a minute or 5 or 10 or 30 later, you think, wow, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So it can be to the detriment of the campaigns.
Okay, very good, thank you. Another question here. You'd mentioned tweets and the difference or similarities between elites and non-elites. Here's a question, it's a chicken-egg question. For the elites and non-elites tweeting about the same topics, do you believe that the elites are influencing the non-elites, vice versa, neither?
Yeah. You know, the traditional model, if we say from an agenda setting perspective, in terms of traditional media setting an issue agenda, not telling us what to think, but what to think about, that's a traditional model. We've also had, some of these traditional media effects theories say the two-step flow. This is where elites, then pundits, others who've gained some currency, and we want to follow their blogs or we want to follow what they're saying to sometimes help me think what I should be thinking. But related to that question, the one bit of empirical evidence, and I think it was from the Freelon study that I cited, that the big bird memes and the others that were popping up were not coming immediately or first from the elites. They were coming from the public, and then the elites picked up on that. We sometimes may refer to that as sort of intermedia, a public's media setting the traditional media. I think it goes both ways. But with this social media stream today, we, the people, have the ability to insert into that agenda what we're thinking more so than we've ever had before.
Yeah, absolutely, I totally agree. And this should have been the precursor question to that, which is, when you did your studies, how did you define political elite? Obviously, that definition would affect the outcome of the studies that you performed.
Yeah, I may have it in the slides, but the first author, one of our grad students, Josh Hawthorne, so it's Hawthorne and Houston, or Hawthorne and all, McKinney's in there somewhere. As I'm recalling, we went and we found a list rated by like Politico or some such, political organization, of the top 100, it may have been the top 50, it may have been the top 75, political commentators, political bloggers, political tweeters. These were the elite, the pundits. Many of these were campaign folks, where the traditional media follow these individuals. And so we wanted to see what were they saying, what were they tweeting out, what kinds of comments were they making, as opposed to the so-called non-elites.
Very good. Another question here that relates to tweeting and some of the effects that I know that your research has found about watching debates generally, but do you think that there's a relationship between people who tweet while they're watching debates and political cynicism?
That's a very good question.
Because it made him think.
Yes, that's a very good question.
So, good job.
That's a very good question, because remember, our earlier research has found that exposure to debates, now this was not exposure to debates while you're tweeting, just watching debates lowers cynicism. But we've also found, in terms of the content analysis of the tweets, social media posts, that they tend to be more snarky and cynical. So I think what we've got to do is now follow up and see if somehow greater social watching may moderate that lowering of cynicism. It very well may. And I don't know the relationship there, that if you're engaged in greater social watching, remember what I said too, and you particularly be one, and you may be one of those more polarized individuals. We measure polarization very quickly this way. We ask you to rate how favorably you feel about various candidates, the one you're supporting and the one you're not supporting. And then we get we subtract the measure and say, oh, you give the person you're supporting a 100, you are in their camp solidly. You give the person you're not supporting a 0. You have no regard whatsoever for that person. There's a 100% gap. And we find out how polarized you are. Those who are more polarized tend to tweet more negatively. And I think we need to look more closely in terms of the level of cynicism that may be affected. They may not come away feeling less cynical from the exposure to debate.
So someone here may have inspired a few.
That's right. There's that, folks. You heard all through tonight. It's like the verdict's still out. We've got to do more work. That's what excites me too. There's a lot of questions we don't know the answers to.
Excellent. Another question here. I think this is interesting. I was kind of trying to consider my answer to it, and I'm not sure what it would be. So, so the political junkies that you mentioned, the elites who follow politics closely, have obviously been stimulated by this campaign cycle and this election. Where do you think that they will transfer this stimulus? Will there be a cool down period after the debates and the election, or what are we going to do with this national energy that has been kind of ramped up during this election cycle?
I don't think for those political junkies, the political elites, the punditry, the punditocracy, that there's ever a ramp down. And particularly now when you have immediate access to promulgate your views, right? I said the devolution of the 24-hour news cycle it's second by second. And so where we go, don't we did this last time, 4 years ago, before we had the re-election of Barack Obama. We were already talking about this election. And I don't know where we then go even before this election's over with of where the energy gets transferred, but it'll get transferred somewhere. Yeah.
All right. I think we have time for maybe one or two more here. We're going to watch the clock pretty closely. So do you have some opinion on, or have you done research on fact checkers, quote unquote, that tweet during debates, or do you think that those are good, bad, ugly?
Yeah, I remember this was early on. Takes me way back. David said, my days at University of Oklahoma, and one of my colleagues there, Linda Cade, who's now passed away, and Linda and I did an article on fact checking. And one of the things that was so apparent is that, and the fact checkers, these are those, sometimes they're online, sometimes you'll see them at the pundits' table immediately after the debates, but usually not. You may read it in the next day's paper. They go through and they do the fact checks. There is such little attention paid to the fact checkers of who got a claim right, who got a claim wrong. And in the moment of the debate, we've heard some moderators say this, right? They're not going to do fact checking. But certainly the traditional fact checkers, we don't take the time to ferret out where can we find this, and now I'm going to go down the line and keep my score and look at all of that. This is my personal, I say that the opposition candidate should be the greatest fact checker on the stage in the debate moment. When one makes a claim that is not right, when one makes a claim that has no basis or maybe contradicts something they've said elsewhere on the campaign trail, the person standing across the stage had better do some fact checking for us. So yeah, that fact checking element has really come into play even in this cycle.
I happen to agree with you on that personally. I think we have time for just one more question. We're going to make this one quick here. If you could just maybe tell us what you think maybe the biggest differences between social media use during this campaign and the 2012 campaign, which you've studied social media use during.
Yeah, I don't know that we've evolved so much from 2012. I think we've had some realization from the campaigns and the candidates. You know, I mentioned the Trump phenomena of him garnering himself so much free media attention just based on his Twitter stream, that we've come to realize, as we saw at those moments in 2012, it seemed like every subsequent political event set new records. That we've come to realize the importance of this commentary, either by candidates themselves, by the public, by media elites, that we're following that messaging and how important it is. Now, 4 years from now, we may be onto something else. Yeah, we may be onto something else.
Entirely possible. Well, thank you again very much. If I did not get to your question, I apologize. We only have so much time here. I believe Dr. Mckinney will be joining us, as you are all welcome to do, for a reception following the presentation here right out in the lobby. Please join us for some snacks and some drinks. And if he's not too busy getting some snacks, you could feel free to ask him your questions if I had the ones that I did not get to. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks again to our sponsors, to Dr. Henry for introducing, to the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs, and to the University Libraries and the Campus Engagement Committee. And thanks especially to all of you for coming and participating in this lecture series. Have a great night.